Welcome to the Luke Macias Show. We are a week out from Christmas and just giving you a final update on the current status of the speaker's race in Texas before y'all take a break for the holidays. I will be coming back to you next week, but it will not be a news update. And then we'll come back in 2 weeks and figure out where some of the dust has settled. At that point, 2 weeks out from the actual public vote, where a small group of Republicans will decide if they publicly cut a deal with the Democrats to be able to control the Texas House with the Democrats and that small group running the Texas legislature. There's a few updates on that and a number of people that were with Dustin Burrows who have publicly come out and said, I was not with Dustin Burrows, I'm with David Cook. Let's get to the show. We start the episode today letting you know that Representative Mano DeAyala from Houston, who had previously been listed on both members' endorsement lists. So Dustin Burrows came out, if y'all recall, and had a press conference and said, I have the votes to be speaker. My colleagues have chosen me. He later said in an interview, you don't really run for speaker. The people choose you. Your colleagues choose you to be speaker, and I've been chosen. So he came out with a list of these 76 members and said, I have been chosen by them to serve as their speaker. Only problem was he hadn't been chosen by them. A lot of them had never even told him, you have my permission to put your name on your list. So each of them started slowly coming off and saying, I'm not on this list. I'm not with Dustin Burrows. And Abraham George and a number of other conservative activists made outreaches to Representative Mano DeAyala to figure things out because Mano was in the room, voted in the caucus, and then evidently at some point told David Cook, you can put me on your list. So when David Cook released his list, originally of 56 Republicans supporting him, Mano DeAyala was on the list. But then when Dustin Burrows released his list of 76, Mano DeAyala was on this list. And Mano did not clarify his position at all. So it kind of left grassroots activists and organizations in the Republican Party of Texas not knowing what to do. Where does this guy stand? And so the Republican Party of Texas reached out to him. This is now known publicly, which we will get to a little later when we get to Cody Harris here in a minute. But let's start with Mano. Ultimately, what Representative DeAyala decided to do was send a text blast to his entire district. And I'm going to read it for y'all. It says, in 2022, I promised I would support the Republican caucus endorsed speaker candidate for Speaker of the Texas House, which I did. In 2024, I made the same commitment, which I plan to do again on January 14th. Yet, that hasn't stopped disingenuous groups and individuals from attempting to spread discontent and lies, just like in the past primary election. You can always count on me to keep my word and fight for the best House district in Texas. I look forward to working with you to pass even more conservative legislation in 2025. Until then, Melissa and I would like to wish you and your family a very Merry Christmas and a blessed New Year. Political ad paid for by Mano DeAyala campaign. Stop equals end. That's the whole text message he sent. Now, first, great work by conservative grassroots people in Texas and the conservative Republicans in his district that are just saying, hey, Mano, we want to know where you stand. Are you with Dustin Burrows or are you with David Cook? It's unclear. Are you cutting a deal with the Democrats or are you supporting the Republican nominee? And he came out and made it clear he's supporting the Republican nominee. I will point out that the people that are lying about Mano were Dustin Burrows. The only reason anybody was asking Mano questions was because Dustin Burrows listed Mano on his list to say he is with me cutting this deal with the Democrats. And so I'm really grateful that Mano has come out. Now, I want to encourage you that as Republicans come out and say, I'm going to vote with the caucus, you need to thank them. Okay? When we talk about taking all the grassroots Republican victories over the last several years and using it to end the significant division. That's the hope, is that we can end that significant division. It's going to happen by ending the small group of Republicans and Democrats that cut these deals to run the Texas House. And in order to do that, we're going to have Republicans that have been part of that come over. If y'all never listened to my conversation with J.M. Lozano was ranked one of the more liberal members of the Texas House last session. He was a former Democrat who very much succeeded under Joe Straus, Dennis Bonnen, and Dade Phelan. He is a member who has come out and said things need to change, right? And grassroots Republicans and conservatives don't respond to that or should not respond to that and say, well, you still haven't voted with us on X, Y, and Z. You still said this before, so I don't want to work with you. No, we should say we want to work with any Republican who wants to work with Republicans to advance Republican policy. Okay? So when Mano DeAyala comes out and says, I'm going to vote with Republicans on the floor, even though he takes a couple little shots at some people, it's okay. Because we really are close to having a united Republican caucus. That's my hope. I still have that hope. I refuse to lose that hope right now. I mean, Advent and Christmas is a time to have hope, but we should really have this hope all the way through. I really do believe that many of these Republican state representatives see that the right thing to do at this point is to come together. Now, not everyone feels that way, and this gets to Cody Harris. Unfortunately, Abraham George had texted Mano and all these reps because the Republican Party of Texas is evidently considering sending some direct mail into Republican voters' districts, probably saying the things that they've been saying, which is that Governor Abbott thinks we should support the Republican nominee, Donald Trump Jr. thinks we should support the Republican nominee, everybody thinks Republicans should come together. There's a small group trying to cut a deal with Democrats. And so literally Abraham George texts several members, and we now know what he texted them because Cody Harris went public with his text. So he evidently sent this to quite a few members supporting Representative Burrows. You can decide if this is reasonable. I think it is. He said, Representative, this is Chairman Abraham George. My desire is for Republicans to unite in accordance with the caucus bylaws and the GOP platform. Before the Republican Party of Texas sends any direct mail into your district, I wanted an opportunity to personally connect about your public position on the speaker's race. Call me at your convenience. That seems pretty reasonable. Hey, we shouldn't increase the conflict without trying to have a conversation. Which, and I'm going to give some of y'all credit. I have had a conversation with a number of you that reached out to your representatives who you had previously disagreed with, who were not supporting reform in the Texas House. And I remember emails that I got from you and text messages I got from you and several of you that I saw and said, hey, I was listening to your show. I just want to let you know my representative, insert last name, and I don't get along. I supported a primary opponent against them. I've campaigned against them. I've asked them tough questions at their town halls. So I don't really know if I should sit down and talk to them about that race for speaker. And I encouraged every single one of y'all, go talk to them and tell them you want to have a working relationship with them and you actually don't want to run against them every 2 years with somebody in your community. What you'd like to do is find enough agreement to where even if they do vote on a bill you disagree on or vote on an amendment you disagree on time and time again, at different occasions, I should say, not like every day, but if they do that and you disagree at times, that's understandable. But on these big ticket items, you hope there's agreement. And many of those individuals that y'all sat down with are currently trying to reform the Texas House. Many of them. And that's why you have to reach out. And that's why Abraham George reached out, because that's the right thing to do, even if you think you disagree with these people. Cody Harris responded. And we know this because Cody published his text messages. So I want to be clear, like this isn't a private conversation. Representative Cody Harris published these text messages. And it says, Abraham, it would be great if you spent even half as much of the effort and money trying to beat Democrats in general elections as you are engaging in the Republican speaker's race. I had a Democrat challenger in the fall, but now is when I hear from you or anyone at RPT, I will continue to do what I believe is right. Threatening me with campaign mailers will never change that. Okay. Here's the thing about that. The RPT spent, I think, a lot more than they're probably currently spending on doing a little bit of outreach to these districts, letting Republicans know that their Republican members are betraying them and cutting a deal with Democrats, which, by the way, is a core function of the Republican Party of Texas. Wouldn't you want a Republican Party that actually engages with Republicans and tells them, hey, we're getting betrayed by Republicans that told us they were actually going to support our stuff, and now they're actually cutting a deal with Democrats? You'd want them to do that. So the Republican Party of Texas has a duty to protect the Republican brand. But the other thing is that Cody Harris represents a district that's like 80% Republican. So it's no surprise that the Republican Party of Texas spent its resources in competitive districts, swing districts, right? And didn't go down over to East Texas and dump a bunch of money in East Texas, a district that's 80-20 Republican. So it is kind of silly to be like, hey, you didn't come help me beat my Democrat. Here's the other irony of that. That Democrat, if they had one, would be supporting Dustin Burrows right now, which is the whole reason that the Republican Party of Texas is talking to Republican voters in Cody Harris's district. The Republican Party of Texas is telling voters in that district, hey, your state representative seems to be backing the same guy that the Democrat would have backed if he had won. We don't think that's the way this should happen in Texas. We think Republicans should come together behind the Republican nominee. So Representative Harris pushed back, posted these text messages publicly, said that, he's not going to be swayed by the bullying or whatever he said. This Sunday afternoon, I'll just read what he said. I'm not trying to put words in his mouth. It says, this Sunday afternoon, I received a text message from Republican Party of Texas Chairman Abraham George threatening to send direct mail to the voters of District 8. The apparent reason, my stance in the Texas House Speaker's race. Now, again, that's what I'm saying. He's taking that text message. I read the text message. Y'all read it or heard it. Read. Does not sound super threatening. This is literally the chairman saying, hey, I'd like to talk to you about this because maybe we actually agree more than we disagree, which is what Mano DeAyala did. And he came out and said, this is my position. And his position is in accordance with the Republican Party of Texas platform, which is why the Republican Party of Texas isn't doing anything. Abraham George immediately posted Mano DeAyala's text message and said, this is great news. Thank you so much. Let's come together, which is the same thing he would do with any other Republican. So this is not a threat. This is a olive branch, as you would call it, to Republicans to say, hey, are you sure you want to cut this deal with the Democrats? Because it seems like maybe you don't. And if you don't, let's just not. And then we might all be able to work together towards things that are best for the people of Texas. Representative Charles Cunningham this week hosted Representative David Cook in his district at the Kingwood Tea Party. And Charles Cunningham is another Republican who was both on David Cook's list because he was in the caucus and voted in the caucus, and he was also on Dustin Burrows' list. So Dustin Burrows claims that Charles Cunningham chose him. He didn't want to be speaker, but Charles Cunningham begged him to be speaker, and then he jumped in the arena. So Charles Cunningham came out and made it clear in his district at an event with David Cook, I'm with David Cook for speaker. Very encouraging to see, and very encouraging to see that unity continue. Now, Representative Terry Wilson is one of the representatives that is kind of out there publicly defending Dustin Burrows. It's a very small list of people that are publicly associating with Dustin Burrows. The Republicans that are publicly doing it are, and I might miss a couple, but I think I'm going to get them. Stan Lambert, Terry Wilson, Jeff Leach, Brooks Landgraf, maybe. I don't know. Stan Gertis, Stan Lambert. I think I already said Jeff Leach. Jared Patterson, Cole Hefner, Greg Bonin from Galveston. These are the people that are out there and publicly saying we're with Dustin, even since he publicly cut the deal with Democrats. So it's maybe 10 that are doing it. Terry Wilson is one of them. I'm going to read some of the op-ed he published in the Lubbock Avalanche Journal. But before that, I want to go to a clip of Terry Wilson in his last Republican primary. In the last Republican primary, Terry Wilson was in his district. By the way, Terry Wilson's opponent, Janine Chapa, very nice conservative and hardworking, I would say, based on the results of her election, got over 40% of the vote, and I think was outspent 12 or 13-1 by Representative Wilson. So while she spent less than $100,000, this guy was spending, between $500,000, $1 million. It's somewhere in that range on his reelection campaign. So he goes out there and he's asked while he's on the campaign trail, Representative Wilson, where do you stand on Dade Phelan? This is before Dade has just passed the baton to Dustin, which is just Dade 2.0. Where do you stand on Dade Phelan? So he gets up and answers the question, and I actually just want to let him answer it in his words, and then we're going to read the op-ed, and we're going to see just all of the ways these guys are having to tie themselves in a pretzel to hold the current position. So let's go to his answer in the primary in front of his voters when he's trying to get reelected on the race for Speaker of the House. Let's go to this clip.
If Dave Phelan is the most conservative and supported speaker to win that election in caucus, by the rules y'all sent me to in 2017 to unseat Joe Strauss, then I'm going to have to support him. If it's somebody else, I'll be supporting them.
If it's somebody else, I'll be supporting them. Understand, Representative Wilson clearly articulates how Republicans established this caucus process because their current Speaker of the House was only there with the block of Democrats voting for him. He then says, we set this process up and Joe Strauss left because he couldn't get there. Now, you would think that Dustin Burrows could have said, well, I can't get the votes, so I guess I'm not going to be Speaker. But instead, he said, hey, Terry, hey, Greg, hey, Jared, hey, Cole, hey, Stan, why don't we just ignore the caucus and go cut a deal with Democrats? And they all said, yeah, let's do that. So imagine what has to happen for you to articulate that to your voters on. I posted this video on my Twitter at January 28th of 2024. So assume that was probably within a day or two of that event happening. So in late January, this is what he says. Fast forward 9 months. He's like, well, I'm not going to be in charge. I don't get to pick the one guy I want to pick, but I think Democrats will pick him. So let's just reverse everything. That is his position. And he has articulated that in a op-ed by the Lubbock Avalanche Journal. Now, here's what's funny about the op-ed. Dustin Burrows did a couple interviews. I would say, surprisingly, the best one was with the Tribune. He did an interview with a number of outlets, and definitely the one that got to real substance and questions was the Texas Tribune, actually, and they pushed him on a number of these things. But he told a number of reporters that's not an endorsement of the Tribune, by the way. I should read a disclosure that, the Texas Tribune uses a lot of leftist language, unfortunately, and the Texas Scorecard does not. And that's why so many of y'all get your news from the Texas Scorecard. Okay, there you go. There's my disclaimer. But I will say the Tribune legitimately did a good job asking Dustin real substantive questions on his race for Speaker of the Texas House. And he told them that when they pushed him on kind of, y'all broke the caucus, you don't have the votes, you're cutting a deal with Democrats, he said, oh, well, Colonel Wilson will be releasing an op-ed shortly that will put this to bed. And it's really funny. Imagine being in an interview and they go, hey, we have this kind of hard-pressing question. You go, well, look, there'll be an op-ed that comes out later that'll clear all this up. So everybody's waiting with bated breath on Representative Colonel Wilson's amazing op-ed. And it comes out. And it's not amazing. It's a short op-ed that, I could probably read. It's 4 paragraphs. Okay, here's what it says. On December 7th, the Texas House Republican Caucus met to endorse a candidate for Speaker of the Texas House. After 2 rounds of voting, no candidate secured the required votes, leaving the caucus deadlocked and exposing deep fractures within the group. This failure was not surprising. Trust in the caucus process has been eroding for some time, and the December meeting only reinforced its illegitimacy. Now, again, he's saying it's illegitimate because 48 people voted for David Cook and 40 people voted for Dustin Burrows, and that somehow makes it illegitimate. By the way, a lot of people disagree because now David Cook's up to 57 votes. So there were people that voted for Cook that say, well, look, the Republican caucus process happens. That's how it works. And now we're with David Cook. He says the problems began long before December. In addition to many issues over many years, our own caucus chair filed to be Speaker and announced he would defy the caucus recommended candidate and take it to the floor. Now, that's being very liberal with the definition of what Tom Oliverson said. Okay, what Tom Oliverson did say was that if these people ignored the caucus process and threw it out and cut a deal with Democrats anyways, then he would take it to the floor. So he was saying, you have to actually come in and let Republicans choose, okay? And so let's respect that. And if you try to circumvent that and come out beforehand, which is what, by the way, the Burrows team was trying to do. Burrows team was telling members of the legislature before Saturday when Dustin got in, we're probably going to wrap this up. We're going to get 76 votes and then we're going to have a press conference before the vote on Saturday and say the race is over. That was their plan. And Oliverson and others had tried to make it clear, if you go cut that deal, then that's not an actual caucus vote. Okay, but that's his interpretation, Terry Wilson's. Let's go back to the Wilson op-ed. This is not a long op-ed, okay? In September, a secret closed-door meeting was held at a barbecue restaurant, excluding nearly half of the Republican House members. A faction, led in part by the caucus chair, attempted to unilaterally select a speaker candidate and pressure attendees to pledge support. This backroom effort not only violated the spirit of the caucus rules, but also set the stage for division and dysfunction in December. Okay. What he's talking about is the fact that the reformers all came together and then united behind one person. And that one person ended up being David Cook. And then the other candidates for speaker, Shelby Slauson, James Frank, John Smithy, and Tom Oliverson, all said, we support David Cook. And that they did that with the majority of the incoming Republican caucus. Now, Terry Wilson is mad that maybe not 100% of the caucus was invited to attend this meeting. A lot of people were invited, is what I've been told by a ton of people, that a ton of members were invited that decided not to come. But here's the funny thing. While this group was getting together saying we need to come together to change the direction of the Texas House, Terry Wilson and other people were telling individuals they were with Dade Phelan. So he's acting like a group of people getting together to decide who they're going to back for speaker is subverting the caucus process when he and everybody else were saying Dade Phelan's going to win. Dade Phelan's going to be the speaker. And I'm supporting Dade Phelan. So you're allowed to all get behind your guy who eventually realizes he doesn't have the votes. But other people are not allowed to get together and get behind somebody else. It's very strange. But he claims, he writes, he feels like if you insert a couple of these words like secret and closed door, then it sounds really mysterious. This is literally just Republicans getting together, says we all don't support Dade Phelan. We all know we have to go in a new direction. And if we're all behind 4 different people, that doesn't make as much sense. Let's get behind somebody. Here's what he continues to say in his op-ed. At the December meeting, it became clear that the process was compromised. The caucus chair, despite endorsing David Cook and participating in the September meeting, refused to recuse himself from running the proceedings. By the way, he says that, but Tom Oliverson, according to everybody who anyone can talk to in that room, did not subvert a single rule of the caucus process. He followed it exactly the way it was supposed to be run. He then says, when members supporting Dustin Burrows requested a brief recess to discuss next steps, the faction aligned with Cook denied the request, prompting many members to leave in protest. And I'm just going to take issue with one sentence there. I'm sorry, but I have a very hard time believing that Representative Wilson was left out of the conversations that many had where they told members we're going to leave if the vote seems deadlocked. Okay. Now, that's not the way the caucus rules are written. There are no rules that say if a minority of the caucus doesn't feel like their guy's going to win, they're allowed to just leave. Hey, we want to take a break. Like, the goal is to say, we're voting, we're voting, we're voting. They talk about the white smoke with the Pope. Basically, get him in the room and just, we're going to find somebody, right? And these guys go, we want to break. Now, what we now know is that they didn't just want to break. That the plan, even the night before, was they thought they had flipped a number of David Cook's votes to Dustin Burrows. So what they thought was going to happen is that Dustin Burrows was going to be in the high 40s, okay? And David Cook would be in the low 40s. And then that would demoralize the David Cook vote. The reformers would say, oh my gosh, our own people have betrayed us. And then several of them would break over. Dustin Burrows would get into the mid-50s, and then he would be the speaker-elect. That was the plan. But if they realized that didn't work, and these people were sticking in against him, they would realize that there was no path to them running the Texas House other than cutting a deal with the Democrats. So at that point, they would leave, and then they would play chicken with the Democrats and force the chair to put out a statement that says Democrats can back Dustin Burrows and then start putting the deal together. That was the plan. And they weren't wanting a 10-minute break. They were wanting to leave and not return, because returning would be legitimizing this caucus process. And the whole plan was, we're going to leave, and then we're just going to call the caucus illegitimate. If it's not going to select us to lead, then it is illegitimate. So I just want to be clear, as I read that part where he talks about, we just wanted a little break, and then they said no. First of all, there is no break in the caucus rules. And second of all, you didn't want a little break. And a lot of members have confirmed that they knew they were all walking out. They haven't said it publicly, but they've confirmed it to a ton of individuals. And then here's how he closes his op-ed. As I said, this is a very short op-ed. Like Dustin Burrows was acting like there was some Magna Carta coming out, from Terry Wilson. Don't worry, all this will be put to bed. It's like the guy put a 4-paragraph op-ed out. And if you scroll, you have to scroll through like 27 ads to get through this op-ed. The Lubbock Avalanche Journal is probably hurting. They're a little bit of a legacy media outlet that's probably dying. The caucus chair, undeterred by the walkout, proceeded with an illegitimate third vote. Again, illegitimate third vote. Very silly. He didn't proceed. Here's the crazy thing. They waited 2 hours. 2 hours. They called all those members and said, please come back to the caucus. And they've said this. A lot of Republican members have said this now publicly. We reached out to every one of them. Some of them did come back and some of them have stayed out, right? And it's not an illegitimate vote because they had a quorum. That's how you conduct caucus business. Do you know how to conduct any business of a caucus? You have to have a quorum present. This is a meeting that is mandated by the bylaws. We are going to meet and we are going to select a speaker. And as long as a quorum shows up, we can vote. And it even says, in order to be nominated, you have to be nominated by at least 2/3 of those present, okay? Or 3/5 on the third round. 3/5 of those present. Present for what? Present in the room, as long as you have a quorum. This is all legitimate, but they feel like if they just throw out the word illegitimate, it means the whole thing didn't happen. And so that's kind of the way they're trying to throw this whole thing up. I'm scrolling through because it is 4.5 paragraphs, but I'll come to the end. Attempts to manipulate the pressure members into supporting Rep. Cook will fail. The focus should remain on electing a speaker who can work with all Republicans, lead effectively, and deliver for the people of Texas. I'm confident on January 14th, Rep. Burrows will secure the support of the majority of Republicans and the entire House. Also a silly statement. There is zero path to Dustin Burrows receiving a majority of the Republican caucus support when he runs for speaker. And he honestly doesn't even have the 76 votes he needs to be speaker, but he is trying hard to get there. Now, I bring all this up to say, the good news at the start of this show is that there are Republicans that are saying, no, I'm voting with the Republican choice. And I am very grateful that our governor, Greg Abbott, has come out and said Republicans should select the next speaker, not Democrats. The Republic, in accordance with the bylaws, very appreciative of the clarification. Donald Trump Jr. put out a statement saying, what the heck is happening? There's some small group of Republicans trying to cut a deal with Democrats in the Texas House. What's going on? So national voices are talking into this. Our state leaders are stepping up. Chairman Abraham George is stepping up out of a goal of uniting Republicans together. And that is the goal, because that is what will be best for Texas. There is this small group. Unfortunately, it seems like Cody Harris and Terry Wilson are there and entrenched and publicly saying that they're being threatened. It's not a threat to tell people that if they vote with Democrats and collude with Democrats to run the Texas House, that Republicans in their district will not be happy. That is reality. Okay? They might take it as a threat because they seem to live in a world where they believe that they should be allowed to freely cut whatever deals they want with any Democrat they want, and that their voters shouldn't know about it. Let's take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Are you worried about your kid's future? You should be. I'm Charles Blaine with Texas Tomorrow. This is a show where we're going to talk about the issues and the people that are pushing the policies that concern your family, your home, and your kids. Catch Texas Tomorrow every Thursday.
Y'all know better. The work you have done is continuing to pay off. It's continuing to get us closer and closer day by day to a Texas House that is less at war with the rest of the Republicans in the state. So don't let up. And don't think that just because your member is on the opposite side right now, that means there's no path. you should reach out to them. You should ask to meet with them. Get some of your friends together. Go sit down with them and tell them, we want to have your back if you're going to actually vote with Republicans. And if you cut a deal with Democrats, we're all going to be against you. It's very simple. This isn't a threat. This is just what any red-blooded Republican would do if somebody betrayed them like that. I'm really excited about where we're at and where we can continue to go. May God bless you, and may God bless Texas.
Do you want to get your news from people who share your values? Texas Scorecard, real news for real Texans.